A racist teacher sends a black student to the back of the class and purposely gives him lower grades than he deserves. She is shocked when the principal overhears her racist words. The bell echoed through the school halls, signaling the start of Malik Andrews's last class of the day. He made his way to his usual seat at the back of Mrs. Langston's history class, feeling the all-too-familiar mix of tension and hope that today, maybe today, things might be different. He glanced around the room, watching his classmates settle in their seats, the easy smiles and laughter as they swapped jokes and whispered about weekend plans. Mrs. Langston's stern voice cut through the noise as she walked to the front of the room, clipboard in hand, her eyes scanning the class with her usual air of authority. She was the kind of teacher who left no room for mistakes or excuses. Her strictness wasn't a problem in itself. Malik respected teachers who pushed their students to excel, but with Mrs. Langston, something felt off. Every time he turned in an assignment, he felt he was being graded on something other than the quality of his work. "All right, everyone," Mrs. Langston began, "I've graded your history reports on key figures of the civil rights movement. Some of you did excellent work. I was especially impressed with Madison, Liam, and Chloe. Your reports showed a clear understanding of the material." She glanced pointedly at Malik. Unfortunately, others seemed to struggle with basic research and analysis. Malik shifted uncomfortably, gripping his notebook. He'd spent hours on his report, researching not only the main events, but trying to capture the essence of the struggles and triumphs of the people involved. He even stayed late at the library to make sure he got everything right. His mother always told him to put his best effort into everything he did, and he took that advice seriously. "Malik, would you please come up and collect your report?" Mrs. Langston's voice was tight, almost like a challenge. He walked to the front of the room, ignoring the curious stares of his classmates. She handed him the paper, her face expressionless, as she tilted her head slightly, eyeing him like he was a puzzle she couldn't quite piece together. When he glanced down at his grade, his heart sank. A C. He read the comment she'd scribbled beneath it. "Lacks depth and clarity. Needs improvement." "Is there a problem, Malik?" Mrs. Langston's tone was calm, but her words had an edge to them, a challenge disguised as politeness. Malik looked up, trying to keep his voice steady. "I just thought I did well, that's all. I put in a lot of time." Mrs. Langston's expression didn't soften. "Effort is one thing, but quality is another. Just because you tried doesn't mean it was good enough." The words hit him harder than he wanted to admit. Malik knew she hadn't given this same speech to any other student. Liam, who was often praised for the most basic observations, had received an A, even though he'd been one of the ones whispering in the back of the library while Malik pored over his research. But, in Mrs. Langston's eyes, Liam's work was somehow more valuable, more insightful. Malik returned to his seat, staring at his paper as Mrs. Langston moved on with the lesson, her voice droning on about historical events he couldn't bring himself to care about at that moment. He felt the sting of frustration, the burning sense that something wasn't right. He'd heard about kids being unfairly graded, but he'd never thought it would happen to him. At least, not like this. As the class ended, Mrs. Langston paused, her gaze falling on Malik again. "And Malik, if you need help, I recommend you come see me after school. There's no shame in asking for assistance if you're struggling." The implication was clear. She didn't believe he was capable of understanding the material on his own. He nodded, muttering a quiet, "Okay," before slipping his report into his backpack. The last thing he wanted was more time with her scrutinizing gaze, but he knew he couldn't keep ignoring this. He couldn't keep his head down forever. Something had to change. He just didn't know how to make that happen yet. As Malik walked out of class, he felt the weight of the paper in his bag, a constant reminder of the low grade she had handed him without a second thought. It wasn't fair, but he wasn't ready to let her see him give up. Malik slouched against the wall outside the school, waiting for his friend Caleb to finish basketball practice. His fingers drummed restlessly on his backpack as he replayed the conversation with Mrs. Langston over and over in his head. Each time, her words stung a little more. After a few minutes, he spotted Caleb jogging over, his hair damp with sweat, and a grin on his face. "What's up, Malik?" Caleb panted, giving him a quick fist bump. "You look like you lost a fight or something." Malik forced a half smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Kind of feels like it. Mrs. Langston gave me another low grade on my report." "I don't get it, Caleb. I worked hard on it. I thought it was good." Caleb frowned, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. "Another low grade? Man, she's got it out for you or something." Malik sighed, kicking a small rock near his foot. "That's what it feels like. And then, when I asked why it was a C, she acted like I didn't even try. Told me I should stay after school for extra help." "Extra help?" Caleb scoffed. "For what? You're doing fine. You know more about history than half the people in that class." Malik shook his head. "It doesn't matter. She just doesn't think I'm good enough, and she never says stuff like that to anyone else. Liam barely reads the textbook, and he got an A." Caleb fell silent for a moment, watching Malik with a thoughtful look. "You should tell your mom. She'd go to bat for you. She'd definitely give Mrs. Langston a piece of her mind." Malik hesitated. "Maybe, but I don't know. I don't want her to worry. She's got enough on her plate, with work and all." Caleb nudged him lightly. "Still, man, if Mrs. Langston's messing with your grades, it's not gonna stop until someone does something. You know she's not gonna admit she's wrong." "Yeah, I know," Malik muttered, feeling a pang of frustration. It was like he was trapped in some silent struggle that no one else saw or understood. "It's just, I shouldn't have to fight to prove I'm trying. Isn't that supposed to be obvious?" Caleb nodded, his expression serious. "Yeah, but some people don't want to see it. You know what I mean?" Malik nodded back, his gaze distant. He did know, but he wasn't sure how to explain it. He couldn't put into words the feeling that Mrs. Langston looked at him differently than she did everyone else. It was in the way her tone sharpened when she talked to him, the way her eyes skimmed past him like he wasn't worth her attention. And worst of all, he couldn't shake the fear that no one else would see it, either. As they walked home, Caleb changed the subject to something lighter, chatting about a video game they both played. Malik tried to keep up, but his mind kept drifting back to Mrs. Langston's sharp voice, her dismissive stare. Her words circled in his head like a bad song he couldn't shake. "Just because you tried doesn't mean it was good enough." Later that evening, Malik sat at the kitchen table, pretending to work on his homework. His mom, Latoya, was busy in the kitchen, stirring a pot on the stove. Every now and then she glanced over at him, her eyes full of the gentle warmth that always made him feel safe. But tonight, he didn't feel safe. He felt small and a little embarrassed, like he was carrying a secret that would somehow disappoint her if she found out. "Malik," her voice broke his thoughts, and he looked up. "You've been real quiet tonight. Something on your mind?" He hesitated, tapping his pencil against the notebook. "It's nothing. Just tired, I guess." She tilted her head, studying him in that way only mothers could. "You sure? You've been working hard in school. I know when you're tired, and this ain't just that." Malik opened his mouth to answer, but the words stuck. Part of him wanted to tell her everything, to let her know how unfair it felt, how Mrs. Langston's words had made him feel like he wasn't good enough. But the other part worried that bringing it up would make things worse. What if Mrs. Langston found out? What if it only gave her more reasons to pick on him? Instead, he shrugged. "I'm just tired, Mom. I'm okay." She didn't look convinced, but she let it go, stirring the pot one last time before turning down the heat. "All right, but you know you can tell me anything, right?" Malik nodded, managing a small smile. "I know. Thanks, Mom." She came over, kissed the top of his head, and gave his shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "Get some rest after dinner, okay?" "You're doing great." Her words made him feel a little better, but as he sat back down to work on his homework, the feeling of being singled out, of being looked at through a lens he didn't fully understand, remained. The following week, Malik walked into Mrs. Langston's class with a renewed determination. He'd spent every evening working hard on his latest assignment, a research report on an influential civil rights leader. His mom had noticed him staying up late, but he'd brushed it off, wanting this report to be as close to perfect as he could get it. Maybe if he put in even more effort, Mrs. Langston would finally see his hard work. The bell rang, and Mrs. Langston strode into the room, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She held a stack of graded papers, thumbing through them as she moved to the front of the room. "Everyone, I've graded your reports on civil rights leaders," she announced, her tone cool and detached. "Some of you managed to demonstrate genuine effort, while others, well, I can't say the same." Malik's heart pounded as she called his name. He rose from his seat, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on him as he made his way to the front. She handed him his paper without looking at him, her mouth set in a thin line. He took a deep breath, glancing down at the grade she'd scribbled at the top, a D+. The blood rushed to his ears, and he stared at the paper in disbelief. D+? He'd poured everything into this report, stayed up late researching, double-checking facts, rewriting parts he thought might not be clear enough. How could she possibly think this was a D+ effort? "Is there a problem, Malik?" Mrs. Langston's voice was sharp, cutting through his thoughts. He looked up at her, forcing himself to speak, even though his throat felt tight. I don't understand. I worked really hard on this. I followed all the guidelines. Why did I get a D+? Mrs. Langston raised an eyebrow, a faint, cold smile playing on her lips. "Sometimes, Malik, hard work doesn't always translate to quality work. It's about understanding the material, not just putting in time. Just because you tried doesn't mean it was good enough." Her words struck him like a punch to the gut. He could feel his hands shaking slightly, but he didn't look away. "But I did understand it," he said, his voice a little louder than he'd intended. "I wrote about all the points you mentioned in class. I even went beyond that. I don't see how this could be a D+. Mrs. Langston's face hardened, and the room fell silent as the other students turned to watch. "I don't appreciate your tone, Malik. You're welcome to see me after school if you need help understanding why your work doesn't meet the standard. This is not the time or place for arguments." "I'm not arguing," Malik replied, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm just asking you to explain why." "Enough." Her voice cut him off, cold and final. She looked down at him, a dismissive glare in her eyes. "You clearly don't have the background to meet my standards, Malik. Not everyone has the right foundation for success in this subject. I suggest you focus on improving, rather than questioning my judgment." The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. Malik's cheeks burned as the meaning behind her words sank in. She didn't believe he was capable. She didn't think he had the right background to understand her lessons, to earn a fair grade, to be anything other than what she'd already decided he was. A quiet, bitter anger bubbled up inside him, stronger than he'd ever felt before. "That's not fair," he said, barely able to keep his voice steady. "I deserve to be treated the same as everyone else." Mrs. Langston's lips curled slightly, an almost imperceptible smirk. "Fairness, Malik, is making sure everyone gets what they've earned. And you, unfortunately, have not earned more than that grade. I suggest you take this as an opportunity to learn some humility." The humiliation was unbearable. He felt trapped, standing there in front of everyone, exposed and powerless. He wanted to shout, to make her see how unfair she was being, but he knew that would only make things worse. He bit back his words, swallowing the frustration that had been building for weeks. Malik turned and walked back to his seat, clutching his paper tightly. As he sat down, he heard a few whispered comments from his classmates, but he forced himself to block them out. He couldn't let her win, couldn't let her take away the one thing he'd worked so hard for, his belief in himself. The rest of the class went by in a blur. He hardly heard Mrs. Langston's lecture, her voice a dull hum in the background as he stared at his paper, the red D+ scrawled across it like a slap in the face. When the bell finally rang, he grabbed his things and hurried out of the classroom, desperate to escape the oppressive weight of her judgment. After school, Malik lingered by the bike racks, still reeling from what had happened. Caleb found him there, frowning as he took in Malik's slumped shoulders and clenched fists. "What happened, man?" Caleb asked, concern in his eyes. Malik didn't answer at first, just handed Caleb the report. Caleb's eyes scanned the paper, his frown deepening. "D+? Are you kidding me? I saw you working on this thing every day. There's no way this is a D+. Malik let out a shaky breath, struggling to keep his voice steady. She doesn't think I'm good enough. She said I don't have the right background for her standards. She made it sound like it didn't even matter how hard I worked. Caleb's face twisted with anger. That's messed up. She's supposed to be a teacher. Isn't she supposed to be helping you, not tearing you down? Malik shrugged, his shoulders slumping. It doesn't matter. She's never going to treat me the same as everyone else. She's already decided I'm not worth it. Caleb put a hand on Malik's shoulder, his voice firm. You're not letting this go, right? You can't just let her treat you like that. Malik's jaw tightened. I don't know what else to do. She's the teacher. No one's going to believe me. Caleb paused, then leaned in closer, his voice low but determined. Tell your mom. I mean it this time, Malik. She's got to know. If Mrs. Langston thinks she can get away with this, she's wrong. Malik looked away, wrestling with the decision. Part of him wanted to keep it to himself, to avoid dragging his mom into it, but the other part, bitter and angry, knew Caleb was right. Mrs. Langston's words had crossed a line, and he couldn't ignore it anymore. Finally, he nodded, a sense of quiet determination settling over him. Yeah, I'll tell her. As he walked home, Malik felt a small spark of hope flicker inside him. Maybe, just maybe, things could change. That evening, Malik sat at the kitchen table, his fingers tracing over the bold D+ marked at the top of his history report. Mrs. Langston's words echoed in his mind, each one making the grade sting even more. Across the room, his mother, LaToya, glanced over at him as she prepared dinner, noticing his slumped shoulders and the way he seemed miles away. Malik, honey, she said gently, setting down her spoon and moving to sit beside him. Something's been on your mind for a while now. What's going on? Malik hesitated, glancing down at his paper before taking a deep breath. It's my history teacher, Mrs. Langston. LaToya's brows drew together. Mrs. Langston? What happened? He looked up, the hurt evident in his eyes. She keeps giving me these low grades no matter how hard I try. I put hours into my last report, and she gave me a D+. When I asked her why, she said I didn't have the right background to meet her standards. She said that some people just don't have the foundation to do well in her class. A flicker of anger flashed in LaToya's eyes, and her voice dropped to a calm but steely tone. She said that to you? About your background? Malik nodded. It's not just the grades, Mom. She talks down to me in front of everyone, like she's looking for ways to make me feel like I'm not trying or like I don't belong there. LaToya's jaw tightened. You've done nothing wrong, Malik. It sounds like she's the one who's forgotten what it means to be a teacher. I'll handle this. She won't get away with making you feel like you're not good enough. The next morning, LaToya walked through the school's polished corridors, her heels clicking with purpose, as she approached Mrs. Langston's classroom. She was directed to the door, where Mrs. Langston was waiting, her expression polite but tense. Mrs. Andrews, Mrs. Langston greeted her, a slight smile on her lips. I understand you had some concerns. Yes, I do, LaToya replied, stepping into the classroom. She took in the sight of the neat rows of desks, picturing her son at the back, listening as his teacher subtly tore down his hard work. I wanted to speak with you directly about the way you've been treating my son, Malik. Mrs. Langston's polite expression faltered for just a moment before she recovered. I assure you, Mrs. Andrews, I treat all of my students equally. My standards are high, and I expect all students to meet them. LaToya met her gaze, her voice unwavering. My son has been working hard on every assignment. I've seen him put in the hours, researching, writing, and making sure his work is up to par. But no matter what he does, he's met with low grades and comments about his background. So, I'm curious, Mrs. Langston, what exactly do you mean by that? Mrs. Langston's eyes narrowed slightly, her tone turning colder. Mrs. Andrews, as a teacher, I'm simply doing my job. I can't lower my expectations just because some students come from, shall we say, less academic backgrounds. Some students simply lack the cultural foundation necessary for higher-level comprehension. LaToya's eyes flashed, and she crossed her arms. Cultural foundation? Mrs. Langston, my son is every bit as capable as any other student in this classroom. If his grades don't reflect that, it's not because he lacks foundation. It's because you refuse to see his abilities. Mrs. Langston's expression hardened, and a hint of impatience crept into her voice. Mrs. Andrews, let's be realistic. Certain students who come from certain backgrounds, may struggle more with complex material. I'm sure Malik has strengths in other areas, but history and analysis may not be suited to everyone. This is an advanced curriculum. LaToya's jaw clenched, but she kept her tone steady. Mrs. Langston, you're making assumptions about my son based on nothing but your own biases. You're assuming he can't succeed because he doesn't fit the image you have of a model student. Mrs. Langston's lips pursed into a thin line. I'm simply giving Malik realistic feedback, Mrs. Andrews. Not every student is destined for academic excellence, and it's better to recognize that early. I don't want to set him up for failure by pretending he's capable of something he's not. LaToya's voice turned cold, her words sharp. Failure? Mrs. Langston, Malik is capable. He's been capable all along, but you've decided he's not, based on nothing but his skin color and your prejudices. You're not helping him by tearing him down. You're holding him back. Mrs. Langston gave a tight smile, her tone dripping with condescension. Mrs. Andrews, if you feel my methods are too harsh, perhaps Malik would do better in a different class, one where he might feel more comfortable. This class may simply be too challenging. LaToya's voice was dangerously calm. Her words clipped. Challenging or exclusive? You're suggesting my son doesn't belong here, not because of his skills, but because he doesn't meet your idea of a proper student. That's not teaching, Mrs. Langston. That's discrimination. Mrs. Langston's face paled, but she held her ground. I'm sorry you feel that way, Mrs. Andrews, but I am not changing my standards for anyone. I'm here to uphold academic integrity, not cater to parents who can't accept the limitations of their children. LaToya took a slow, steadying breath, her voice barely above a whisper. If academic integrity means judging a child by their race, then you're not just a poor teacher, you're an obstacle. I've already spoken to Principal Jansen, and I'll be requesting a full review of Malik's work by another teacher. If his grades and treatment reflect anything other than fairness, you will be held accountable. For the first time, Mrs. Langston's confident demeanor faltered. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but her voice came out strained. You're welcome to speak with the principal, but I doubt you'll find anything amiss. LaToya held her gaze, her voice low but fierce. We'll see. And if this is what you call teaching, then it's only a matter of time before others see through you as well. With that, LaToya turned and left the classroom, her steps steady and unyielding. She would not allow Mrs. Langston or anyone else to tear down her son's confidence or his future. Malik was anxious as he walked into school the next day. He knew his mom had spoken with Mrs. Langston, and he wasn't sure what to expect. Part of him worried that the teacher's attitude might worsen, that she'd try to find other ways to make him feel small. But he also felt a surge of strength knowing his mom was on his side, standing up for him. Whatever happened, he didn't feel so alone anymore. At lunchtime, he met up with Caleb in the cafeteria. Caleb had already heard from other students that something big had gone down between Mrs. Langston and Malik's mom. He leaned across the table, eyes wide with curiosity and excitement. Yo, Malik, Caleb whispered. I heard your mom told off Mrs. Langston yesterday. What happened? Malik shrugged, glancing around to make sure no one else was listening. She talked to her. Yeah, she called her out for the way she's been treating me. Caleb grinned. Finally. I bet she didn't see that coming. So, what happens now? Malik lowered his voice. My mom asked Principal Jansen to have another teacher look at my work. She thinks Mrs. Langston's grading is unfair, and the principal said he'd make it happen. Caleb's grin faded slightly, a cautious look in his eyes. You think he'll actually do it? Malik shrugged, feeling a twinge of uncertainty. I don't know, but if they don't, my mom isn't going to let this go. She's serious. Later that day, Principal Jansen called Malik down to his office. Malik's heart pounded as he walked through the halls, trying to keep his thoughts calm. When he reached the office, the principal was waiting for him. a folder of his assignments open on the desk. Another teacher, Mrs. Conway, sat beside him, reviewing the contents with a serious expression. "Malik, thank you for coming," Principal Jansen began, his tone neutral. "Your mother brought some concerns to my attention, and we're going to take a closer look at your recent assignments. Mrs. Conway, our assistant head of history, will be conducting an independent review." Malik nodded, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension as he took a seat. Mrs. Conway looked at him kindly. "I've heard about your work ethic, Malik, and I want to assure you that we're here to be fair. I'll be reviewing these assignments with fresh eyes, so let's take our time and make sure everything's accurate." She flipped through his assignments, pausing occasionally to make notes. Malik watched as she scanned each page, her expression thoughtful. With each passing minute, the tension in the room seemed to build, the silence heavy as she examined every detail. After a while, she looked up, a frown creasing her brow. "Malik," she said gently, "from what I'm seeing here, your work shows a strong understanding of the material. Your reports are thorough, well-organized, and insightful." She turned to Principal Jansen, her tone growing sharper. "There's no justifiable reason these assignments should be graded this low. Malik's work deserves higher marks." Principal Jansen's face shifted, a trace of discomfort showing as he cleared his throat. "Are you saying there's been an error in the grading, Mrs. Conway?" Mrs. Conway nodded, her expression firm. "Yes, I am. In fact, the discrepancies are significant. Malik's assignments were graded far lower than his peers for comparable work. This suggests a pattern that's troubling, to say the least." Principal Jansen shifted in his seat, looking visibly uncomfortable. "We'll need to follow up on this, of course. Thank you for your honesty, Mrs. Conway." Turning to Malik, the principal's voice softened. "Malik, we'll be adjusting your grades accordingly. You have our assurance that any bias or unfair treatment in this matter will be addressed seriously." Malik felt a surge of relief wash over him. It was the first time he'd heard someone at school acknowledge the unfairness, and it made him feel validated in a way he hadn't expected. "Thank you," he said quietly, looking between them. I just wanted to be treated the same as everyone else." Mrs. Conway nodded, offering him a warm smile. "And that's exactly what you deserve, Malik. We'll make sure of it." That evening, Malik told his mom everything that had happened in the principal's office. Latoya listened intently, her expression a mixture of satisfaction and resolve. "So they're adjusting your grades?" she asked, a proud glint in her eye. Malik nodded. "Yeah, Mrs. Conway said my work was good, and that it deserved higher marks. And Principal Jansen agreed to change them." Latoya's smile widened, and she reached out to hug him. "I'm so proud of you, Malik. You stood up for yourself, and you didn't let anyone make you feel less than you are." Malik hugged her back, feeling a sense of pride he hadn't felt in a long time. "Thanks, Mom. I couldn't have done it without you." Latoya held him close for a moment, then pulled back, her gaze serious. "But this isn't over. If Mrs. Langston has been treating you this way, it's possible she's done it to others too. The school needs to know what's happening in her classroom." Malik nodded, understanding her point. Mrs. Langston's behavior hadn't just been about grades, it had been about making him feel out of place, unworthy of success, and now he was ready to make sure she faced the consequences. As he lay in bed that night, Malik felt lighter than he had in weeks. He knew there was still more to confront, but he also knew he didn't have to do it alone. And for the first time, he felt hopeful that things might really change. The next morning, Malik walked into school with a sense of renewed confidence. It felt strange, almost surreal, to think that things might finally be changing. For the first time in weeks, he didn't dread going to history class, knowing that someone had finally listened to him. When he arrived at Mrs. Langston's classroom, he noticed an unusual tension in the air. The students were whispering in low voices, casting glances toward the teacher's desk where Mrs. Langston sat, her face set in a rigid mask of forced calm. As Malik took his seat, he felt her gaze flicker briefly toward him, but she quickly looked away, focusing on her lesson plan. She seemed distracted, her movements stiffer than usual. He could almost sense the irritation simmering beneath her composed exterior, and he knew the reason. Mrs. Conway's review had revealed the truth. Midway through the lesson, there was a knock on the door, and Principal Jansen stepped in, followed closely by Mrs. Conway. The entire class turned to watch as they entered, their eyes widening with curiosity. Mrs. Langston's face tightened, her jaw clenching slightly. "Mrs. Langston," Principal Jansen said, his voice firm but polite, "could we have a word with you in the hallway, please?" For a moment, Mrs. Langston hesitated, her expression faltering. She glanced around the classroom, clearly aware of the audience, before giving a tight nod. She set down her chalk and followed them out, closing the door behind her. The room buzzed with murmurs the moment the door shut. Malik exchanged a glance with Caleb, who raised his eyebrows in surprise, giving Malik a quick thumbs up. Outside in the hallway, LaToya had joined Principal Jansen and Mrs. Conway, and the four of them stood in a tight circle. Mrs. Langston's expression was tense, her eyes narrowing as she glanced at LaToya with barely concealed disdain. "Mrs. Langston," Principal Jansen began, his voice calm but firm, "we've completed a review of Malik Andrews's recent assignments. Mrs. Conway found consistent discrepancies between the quality of his work and the grades he received. These inconsistencies, combined with your repeated remarks about his background, raise serious concerns." Mrs. Langston's face grew pale, but she lifted her chin, her voice cold. "Are you suggesting that I haven't been fair in my grading? Because I assure you, I hold all students to the same standards." LaToya's eyes flashed, her tone measured but pointed. "The issue isn't about standards, Mrs. Langston. It's about bias. Malik is a hard-working, intelligent student, and you've been treating him as though he's less capable simply because he doesn't fit your assumptions." Mrs. Langston's lips pressed into a thin line. "With all due respect, Mrs. Andrews, some students simply lack the cultural context necessary to excel in an academic setting. It's not my fault that your son struggles with material that requires a certain level of background knowledge." LaToya's voice grew colder. "Cultural context. Are you implying that Malik's race or upbringing makes him less suited for your classroom? Because that's not only insulting, it's blatantly racist." Mrs. Langston's composure cracked for a moment, a flicker of indignation crossing her face. "Mrs. Andrews, I don't appreciate being accused of something so vile. I have always maintained high expectations for all my students, regardless of background." Mrs. Conway stepped forward, her voice stern. "Mrs. Langston, the evidence suggests otherwise. Malik's assignments were graded significantly lower than similar work from other students. Additionally, the comments you've made about his background and his lack of foundation are not only inappropriate, but suggest a clear pattern of discrimination." Mrs. Langston's voice grew defensive, her tone laced with bitterness. "You're all reading too much into this. Perhaps Mrs. Andrews is just too sensitive about her son's performance. I'm here to provide an honest education, not to coddle." Principal Jansen's expression hardened, his tone firm. "Regardless of your intentions, Mrs. Langston, your actions have created an unwelcoming environment for Malik, and we cannot allow that to continue. As of today, you are being placed on suspension pending a full investigation." Mrs. Langston's eyes widened, a flash of disbelief in her gaze. "Suspension? You're really going to punish me because of one parent's complaints?" "It's not just one complaint, Mrs. Langston," LaToya said firmly. "It's a pattern of behavior, one that you've tried to hide behind your so-called standards." Mrs. Langston's face twisted with anger, but she forced a tight smile. "Fine, do what you must. But don't expect me to change my standards just because some people can't handle them." With that, she turned and walked briskly down the hallway, her heels clicking loudly against the floor as she left the building. When LaToya returned home that evening, she found Malik waiting for her, his expression a mixture of curiosity and anxiety. "What happened?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. LaToya sat beside him, her hand resting on his shoulder. "Mrs. Langston has been suspended, Malik. The school found that she was treating you unfairly, and they're investigating further." Malik's eyes widened in surprise, a hint of disbelief in his voice. "She's really gone?" "For now," Yes, Latoya said, her voice gentle. But what's important is that you were heard. You stood up for yourself, and you made them see the truth. Malik took a deep breath, the weight of relief settling over him. He had spent so many days doubting himself, wondering if he was truly at fault. But now he knew the truth. The problem had never been him. "Thanks, Mom," he said quietly, his voice filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you." Latoya smiled, hugging him close. "You did this, Malik, and don't let anyone ever make you feel like you're less than you are. You're strong, capable, and you deserve every opportunity." As Malik sat back, a sense of peace settled over him. For the first time, he felt like he could truly be himself, without fear of judgment or prejudice. And that, more than anything, was a victory he would carry with him. The following week, Mrs. Langston returned to the school for a formal review. Her suspension had rattled her, but she'd convinced herself that the investigation would vindicate her, that the school would realize she'd simply been upholding standards and doing her duty as an educator. She walked through the hallways with her chin held high, ignoring the whispers from students and teachers alike. As she approached the principal's office, she saw Malik walking down the opposite hall, heading to class. He glanced up and met her eyes briefly before quickly looking away. She felt a surge of resentment boil up inside her. Here was the student who'd dared to challenge her, the one who'd stirred up trouble and painted her as something she wasn't. Unable to contain herself, she called out, her voice echoing in the corridor, sharp and accusatory. "You!" she snapped, her tone dripping with disdain. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Malik froze, turning slowly to face her, his expression a mix of surprise and unease. He glanced around, seeing that other students and teachers had stopped to watch the exchange, their eyes wide with curiosity. Mrs. Langston continued, her voice rising, her face flushed with anger. "All this nonsense, this complaint about unfair treatment. You think you're special? You think you deserve a free pass just because you whined about your grades?" Malik stayed silent, his eyes wary as he watched her unravel. He didn't need to say anything. Mrs. Langston was doing enough damage on her own. "You don't belong in my class," she continued, her voice breaking as her anger spilled out. "You're not up to the standard, and everyone knows it. I was trying to help you. But no, you'd rather play the victim." A few teachers had stepped out of their classrooms by now, whispering to each other, their expressions a mixture of shock and disbelief. Principal Jansen hurried over, his face pale with alarm as he approached Mrs. Langston. "Mrs. Langston, that's enough," he said firmly, placing himself between her and Malik. But she ignored him, her voice growing louder. "People like him," she spat, gesturing toward Malik, "are always looking for a shortcut, always looking to cry discrimination to get what they want. It's disgraceful." The principal's face turned a shade of red, his tone sharp and commanding. "Mrs. Langston, this behavior is unacceptable. You are to leave this building immediately." She looked around, her expression defiant. "I have a right to defend myself. I've done nothing wrong except try to bring some standards to this school." "Enough," Principal Jansen said, his voice hard. "Mrs. Langston, your conduct today is grounds for immediate termination. Your employment with this school is over." Mrs. Langston's eyes widened in shock as the words sank in, her defiance crumbling. For a brief moment, she looked around, realizing the full extent of her actions. Teachers and students stared at her, their expressions filled with disgust and disbelief. She turned her gaze back to Malik, her eyes narrowing one last time. "This is your fault," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You've ruined everything." Without another word, she turned and stormed out of the building, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. The silence that followed felt heavy, charged with the weight of what had just happened. Principal Jansen turned to Malik, his expression softening. "Are you all right, Malik?" Malik nodded, though he felt a swirl of emotions, relief, disbelief, and even a bit of sadness that someone could harbor so much hatred. "I'm sorry you had to experience that," Principal Jansen said, his voice gentle but firm. "But know this, her actions reflect only her own failings, not yours. You're a bright, capable student, and this school is here to support you." Malik gave a small, grateful nod, his voice quiet. "Thank you, Principal Jansen." As he walked away, he felt a new lightness in his step. The teacher who'd tried to make him feel small, to break his spirit, was gone. For the first time in a long time, Malik felt like he could truly be himself, without fear of judgment or prejudice, and that was a victory he'd carry